everyone, and welcome back. Today I am working on a late 15th century cap that kind of grew out of the kerchief style of just tying a piece of fabric over your head. And it's a very, very simple make. It basically involves 3 pieces of linen that I need to hem and then sew to each other. So while I am working on this, I am going to answer the 21 questions that you might have seen circulating through CosTube already. This is an updated version. I did the 20 questions last year. This is a new and updated version of that with new questions and some other stuff. So let's get into it. What is my favorite genre of costuming? Historical and vintage. I did dabble for a little while in cosplay, but that was 15 years ago now, so it's been a while. What originally got me into costuming, living history, etc.? I always loved dressing up as a little kid. You know, I had a dress-up box and everything. But what really cemented it for me was when I was 11, my parents took me to Colonial Williamsburg for the first time because they had a Felicity in Williamsburg tour package thing. I don't really remember much of it at this point, but I know that it involved visiting some of the places, and my favorite part was we had tea with Miss Manderly, and that was the first time I realized that it was possible to combine a love of dressing up with a love of history. What are my favorite materials to work with? In general, natural fibers. It does vary slightly depending on what specifically I'm doing. If it's sewing, I like working with linen and silk or I should say that's what I use most often, and cotton. If it's knitting, I like working with wool. I tend to knit the most with wool. And then if it's things like card weaving or other tape weaving, my favorite for that is silk. Who taught me my crafts? Initially, my dad was actually the one who taught me how to sew, starting when I was about 4 years old. He taught me a lot of the basics, you know, how to put on a button, basic running, back stitch, all that kind of stuff. And once my dad taught me everything that he knew, my mom took over and she started teaching me. And she was the one who taught me how to work from patterns and use a sewing machine and all of that kind of stuff. And then from there, I just went off on my own, learning primarily from books until once I was a little older, I took some courses at Fashion Institute of Technology and learned, you know, where I could, when I could, what I could. Draft, drape, or use a commercial pattern. I know how to do all of them. I've taken classes on, well, not using a commercial map, but yes. I don't tend to drape a lot because right now I don't really have a dress form that is the correct shape for me. I have the bootstraps pattern, like I've already done it. I just haven't actually made it yet. But my favorite is to draft and occasionally alter commercial patterns. Am I team cut or team trace when it comes to patterns? I usually cut. That is, you know, I put my pattern on my fabric and I just cut cut it out rather than putting my pattern down, tracing, and then cutting. The one exception is when I make 18th century stays, which I did. When did I do those? Last year. Just because of the technique for how to make them in the 18th century manner. That is the one time where I would, you know, trace the pattern out and then cut it out rather than yeah. Pins or pattern weights. I use pins. I don't actually have any pattern weights. On very rare occasion, if I'm doing something big, I will use weights and then pin it down, especially if I'm in my sewing room with my ceiling fan on. But otherwise, generally always pins. Scissors or rotary blade. I actually use both depending on what it is I'm cutting out. Rotary blades are great for, long straight lines. But yeah, I also use scissors as well. How many pieces are lurking in my UFO bin? I refuse to give a number, but I have more than one UFO bin, so take from that what you will. What costume would I like to revisit? It's not so much a costume as just a garment piece. What I really want to do is remake. Okay, so back in 2011, yeah, so 10 years ago, I made the hooped bustle, the 1872 hooped bustle from Corsets and Crinolines. And I honestly love how it looks, but the bustle shape was just not quite right, mainly because I am not the size the original person who owned it was, so I made some guesses on how to scale up and size up that bustle, but it was a little bit off. So it's actually already on my project list. I have a list next to my computer of video ideas, so remaking that hooped bustle is on my list for something I want to make a video for, so that's definitely going to get revisited. Do I pick a project and then procure materials, or do I collect materials and let them speak to me? Both. Sometimes I will buy fabrics or supplies with a specific project in mind, and other times, especially when there are really good sales going on, I will just buy a quote-unquote dress length of material, which for me, I generally aim for 8 yards, and just put it in my stash. And sometimes I will make something with it, and then I have a lot of things still sitting in my stash that I still don't know what I'm going to do with them. And then, of course, sometimes I do buy things with a specific project in mind and then decide I'm not going to do that project anymore, so into the stash. Sometimes you just need to let fabric marinate in the stash for a while before you really know what its best final use is. Do I have any bad sewing habits? It's hard to say because it also depends on what type of sewer you are. To my friends who are very fit a mock-up perfectly, stick straight to the pattern, I would be a horrible sewer. Because, I do make a mock-up, but I also don't worry about getting a perfectly fitting mock-up. Because what you can make a perfectly fitted mock-up, and once you actually use the final fabric, sometimes it doesn't fit anymore. So I do account for that when I'm sewing. Let's see, would anything else be considered a bad habit? Probably my tendency to not put all of the final closures on things. That really is a bad habit. I have one dress that I made in 2012 that still does not have buttons or buttonholes, and the few times I've worn it, I haven't worn it in a while now just because I haven't done that time period. But yeah, the few times I wore it, I just pinned it shut, and it's not a style that's supposed to pin shut. So yeah, that's probably my biggest bad habit. Do I put my pins parallel to my seams or perpendicular? Always perpendicular, and I do that because this is related. I'm just connecting these two questions even though they're technically separate. Do I sew over my pins or take them out as I go? I sew over them, which is why I put them in perpendicular so that I can sew over them, because yeah, I guess that's also a bad sewing habit related to the previous question. For machine sewing, am I barefoot, in socks, or use shoes on my sewing machine pedal? I cannot operate my sewing machine with shoes on. Absolutely not. I will sometimes wear shoes, and by shoes I mean slippers, into my sewing room because, pins on the floor. It was more important when I had a carpeted room, not so much. My current sewing room has a hardwood floor. But generally, most of the time I'm in my house, I'm barefoot. If it's really cold in winter, I will have socks on. But yeah, no, I can't have a hard soul when I'm trying to use my sewing machine. I don't know why, I just can't do it. How has the pandemic changed what/how I sew or craft? One of the biggest changes it's made is with no firm deadlines. I have been even worse than usual about actually getting things done. Time management skills, I don't really have them. Another big change is I have been doing and focusing more on handwork and hand things, not just hand sewing, but like knitting and crocheting, small detailed things that take a longer amount of time. Basically, I've been doing more of that, so that has changed. Instead of, often me waiting until like the week before an event and then starting an outfit for it. That's a bad idea, guys. Don't do that. Which era or genre would I still like to make a costume of? I think one of the big things that I'm planning on doing soon, that I've been thinking about doing for ages, is something that'll probably date to like the 1630s. So yeah, I think that's the only thing that I haven't done yet that I want to do. That's a big one. More 17th century stuff in general. I may or may not do like a 1660s style dress at some point in the next couple of years as well. I haven't decided, but definitely I have firm plans to do a 1630s outfit probably next year at this point in time. What is my biggest sewing or crafting pet peeve? I will have to say gatekeeping. It is... There are just so many forms of it still within the hobby and community in so many ways, be it people trying to gatekeep because of what others, like the materials other people sew with, or the types of patterns they use, or even just, if they're only starting out, to let's be honest, there are so many isms in the costuming world as well. Ableism, racism, ageism, sexism, especially in like war-based reenactment groups. Basically just any type of gatekeeping at all. I would love to see it gone from my hobby. What do I like to watch or listen to while sewing? I tend to use a variety of things for background noise while I'm sewing. Sometimes it'll be things like Time Team. If I'm working on a really long project, Time Team is great because there's 20 seasons of it. And because I've already watched it before, I don't need to pay attention to it. Sometimes I'll do like drama series or movies, the 95 Pride and Prejudice, or the extended edition of The Lord of the Rings, because there is no other version besides the extended versions. But basically, in general, what I put on as background is a TV show or movie or series of movies that I've already watched before. Just something so that I have noise going on, but it's not something I need to closely pay attention to. Do I have any sewing assistants? I have 3 of them, 4 if you count my husband. He does not help with sewing, so I don't know if I can call him an assistant. They are my twins, Isis and Osiris, who will be 16 years old in August. They're still my babies, though. And then I have Carly, who is 18 now. So, yeah, my kitties are all senior kitties. Tea, coffee, or chocolate? Number 1 is absolutely tea. My preferences within the tea genre are either flavored black teas or some herbal teas. I don't like green tea at all. I've tried several and it isn't for me. Second choice would be hot chocolate. I do not do coffee at all. I honestly don't even like the smell of coffee, let alone the taste of it. What are my goals or plans moving forward? I've already done in the past 10 or so years, like a lot, almost all of what I've done has been either 18th or 19th century costuming with, you know, a couple other things scattered here and there. So what I really want to do and what I plan on focusing on is I do want to do some 17th century stuff. As I already mentioned, I have a 1630s outfit partially planned. And I also definitely intend to do more medieval stuff. I'm just feeling medieval lately, so I'm going to keep going with that. And yeah, that's where I'm tentatively heading. I don't want to like say 100% I'm not going to do anything besides that, because sometimes you just get inspired to do something. But yeah, mainly, you know, pre-1700 I think is what is going to be a lot of what I will be working on. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you want to see more in the future, please subscribe. I put out videos twice a month. I'm actually going to be moving to the first and third Wednesday rather than the first and third Tuesday, but I'll still be putting out videos twice a month, and I have plenty planned, and the CosTube Symposium is coming up in August, and I've got stuff planned for that as well. So I hope to see you in the future. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye.